The very first family member I came out to was my sister, Saira. I was 17 at the time. I used to work for free at her theatre and speech and drama academy over my school holidays as payback for her investment in my education. And one day, quite out of the blue, she confronted me in her office on the subject of my sexual orientation. Her approach, though ultimately accepting and extremely supportive, was sort of amusing and paradoxical at first because she did a fair amount of preambular concern trolling and catastrophizing in the 15 or so minutes that led up to me confirming to her that I was gay. I remember she opened with, "Imran, I need to ask you something. Please tell me you're not gay. I mean, it's okay if you're gay, but please, God, don't be gay," she continued. "Now, I want you to know that I'll accept you if you are gay, but please say you're not." By that point, the corners of my mouth had gone up and I almost burst into laughter at her curious mixed messaging. I thought, "Oi, hey, which is it? Which do you want to hear, gay or nay?" But to be fair to her, Saira knew a lot of gay men in the theatre world, and they were all miserable and lonely by their own admissions. And being the proverbial protective big sis that she was concerned that a similarly sad and tragic fate awaited me. Saira wasn't being entirely alarmist, though. As I mentioned, the 70s and 80s were decades during which homosexuality was punishable by law in South Africa. And in that oppressive, heavily policed climate, it was next to impossible to even imagine, much less conduct, a healthy, sustainable gay relationship during those tyrannical times, especially if you were working class and a person of color. I don't quite know how I was convinced of this, but perhaps it goes back to that self-determinism I mentioned in a previous video. I just knew in my heart of hearts that I was going to be in a wonderful, loving relationship one day, and as the fates would have it, I've been very fortunate in that regard, with no less than 5 great love stories and sweeping epic romances in my lifetime. In a world where so many people never find a single soul to love and be loved by, I feel so grateful and totally loved up, as I like to put it. And if Kismet continues to be kind, Chris is the man I'm going to grow old, make that grow even older with. And it gives me great pride and pleasure to report that we are as much in love now as we were 16 years ago when we first met. Now, returning to my sister, despite Saira's initial apprehensions, she has always been incredibly encouraging and supportive. Shortly after our conversation, Saira outed me to my older brother, with whom I'd always had something of a strained and contentious relationship. He signaled acceptance and even enthusiastic approval for many years, but perhaps betrayed his true feelings when he once allegedly referred to me as that Moffy in a jealous fit of rage with my mother. I'll never know his true feelings, and frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn, since my brother and I have been estranged for over 15 years, for reasons not related to that mask-off moment. Speaking of my mother, it was actually the occasion of my first official romantic relationship that inspired me to come out to her. It was 1991, and I was 20 years old at the time. My parents were still separated, and my dreamy new boyfriend really wanted to meet my family. Boyfriend. Oh, it sounds so cute and ridiculous saying that at my age. Hi. Now, I didn't wish to insult my mum or my boyfriend by introducing him as just a friend, especially since my friend wasn't at all in my peer or social group. He was 19 years my senior and a white Afrikaans man who worked in the corporate world, no less, and we were still living under the shadow of apartheid, so context. Anyway, a week prior to introducing my handsome fella to my mum, I sat her down and gently broke the news that I was gay and that if she was open to the idea, I would very much like her to meet my new boyfriend. As I mentioned in my first video, my mum comes from a long line of socially conservative and religious folks, so I was fully expecting her to reach for the smelling salts, to be honest. But she really surprised me. After I came out to her, she simply smiled and uttered the words, "I know. I've always known. A mother always knows." That my mom, a Muslim woman who had a very orthodox traditional upbringing, could have the compassion and courage in that moment to defy the social and cultural constrictions of her community and defer instead to a parent's instinct to love their child unconditionally while recognizing the futility of trying to change what is in their nature is testimony to the fact that people are full of surprises and shouldn't be treated as foregone conclusions. My mum passed away last year, and even though our relationship was deeply problematic in the end, I'll always be grateful to her for that act of unconditional love and for being such an ally. I remember once asking her if she'd prefer it if I was especially discreet around people in her community, and she made me so proud when she said, "Let them talk. I'll just tell them my son is gay. So what? Mind your own bloody business." Though in the years that followed, as I got to know my mum's backstory a lot better, I came to understand that she was something of a rebel and a nonconformist herself. She was born into a very large family of brothers and sisters, and as a little girl, she had big dreams, hopes, and aspirations. She loved glamour and wanted to see the world and become an actress. She was certainly very beautiful. She was also very curious and creative in her own way. But her hopes and dreams were invalidated and crushed by the traditional patriarchy of her era that consigned and limited women to the very prescriptive roles of wife, mother, and homemaker. For example, her working-class parents prioritized and directed the family's meager resources, including the tastier, more nutritious food, to her brothers and their upliftment, with the idea of giving them the best start in life so they were more likely to succeed as breadwinners for their own families. And when she came of age, my mum's family also pressured her into marrying her first husband, a man she did not love. She would eventually realize her dream of leaving the shores of Durban to seek adventure and discover the world. With the blessings of her first husband, she frequently journeyed with one of her sisters aboard the British India Line's more long-lived ships, the SS Karunja, as part of its Southern Africa service to India. It was actually on one of those frequent voyages that she fell in love for the first time with a smooth musician named Martin Mendes. Martin, who hailed from Goa in India, played in the ship's band and wooed her with his repertoire of Sinatra songs, apparently. Now, growing up, it was always a mystery and a subject of curiosity to me that so many of my baby pictures appeared to be deliberately torn in half. My mum made up some yarn about how they were merely damaged from handling or from being transferred to successive new photo albums. But later it was revealed that the reason one half of the pictures had been mysteriously purged from the annals of history was because they would have revealed the identity of my biological father. No points for guessing who that was. So I was Mum and Martin's love child, and when I came into the world, I was apparently even baptized Imran Mark Mendes in a church in Goa. After a messy divorce from her first husband, I believe my mum hoped to start a life with Martin, but he caved to objections from his Catholic family and they never married. When news of my mother's bastard son started to spread, one of her sisters, who was married and infertile, confronted my mum and applied enormous pressure and emotional blackmail to get her to give me up to her for adoption. This would succeed in both fulfilling her sister's dream of having a child of her own and saving the entire family from almost certain scandal and disgrace. But Mum refused. Still, my existence remained something of a shameful little secret for a while. Whenever suspicious and nosy extended family members popped in unannounced to visit my mum at her humble little basement flat, hoping to confirm the rumors that she'd had a child out of wedlock, she would, in a delicious bit of foreshadowing, hide me in the fricking closet. With the door slightly ajar so I could breathe, of course. Apparently, she would pray that I wouldn't start crying and give up the game during those visits from her relatives, which would sometimes last over an hour. Can you imagine how tensely on tenterhooks she must have been? Baby? What baby? I don't hear a baby. When I was old enough to learn the truth, my mum would proudly tell me how I didn't once make a fuss or a sound. According to her, I knew the drill and I would just chill in my carry cot in the semi-dark of the closet, patiently waiting for her return. Apparently, I thought it was a game of peekaboo because when her visitors left and she'd come to get me, I would squeal with excitement when she opened that closet door and I saw her face. By the way, I still squeal with excitement whenever a closet door gets flung wide open. Hint, hint. Look, it must have taken enormous courage to stand up to the censure and pressure from her family and community, but I believe that having me under those challenging circumstances was a rite of passage that awakened a latent countercultural streak within my mum too. And I think that learning that her free-spirited love child was different and boldly standing by him against those who didn't approve only fueled her righteous protest against the culture that had stifled and denied her her dreams and agency. Frankly, I think having a dynamic, unconventional son felt like sweet revenge because it presented my mum with another opportunity to stick it to the patriarchy and hold up a middle finger to the regressive societal norms and attitudes. I'm convinced she rebelliously relished every moment spent preparing the huge platter of samosas she proudly presented to my Afrikaans boyfriend on his first visit. On the day I brought him over, she looked so chuffed. Plus, she flirted outrageously with my boyfriend. She was always such a shameless flirt. Anyway, after giving birth to me, my mum eventually met the man I would grow up believing to be my natural father, Raman Varga. And despite discovering that he was not my biological dad in my mid-teens, I still regard him as my one and only father. Varga Sr. had 2 daughters from his first marriage, but he'd always wanted a son, and my mum came with one very conveniently ready-made. So my name was changed from Imran Mark Mendes to Imran Varga, proving the old proverb, one man's trash is another man's treasure.